Africa, 17th century to date. Why Africans are more wary of the West than China and Russia. Since their first interaction with Westerners hundreds of years ago, Africans have not known peace. From slavery to violent colonial occupation to unconscionable exploitation, Westerners continue to treat Africans as subhuman and undeserving of enjoying human dignity and a quality of life comparable to other races. All African leaders who have dared to stand for their people's interests are seen and treated as enemies by Western powers. Here are notable African leaders who have been killed in various ways by Western powers directly or through proxies since Ghana gained its political independence in 1957. Reuben Nyobe, Cameroon, 1958, assassinated by the French army outside his village. The French found Nyobe's ideas of true independence so unsettling that they destroyed all of his writings and forbade his countrymen from even mentioning his name in public after his death. Barthélemy Boganda, Central African Republic, 1959. Assassinated in a plane explosion during a campaign trip in his country. Boganda was blown to pieces in a small plane he was traveling in with 4 associates and 4 crew members from the city of Berberati to Bangui. He was regarded as too smart by the French for embracing Nkrumah and Sékou Touré's ideas of true independence. He was especially hated by the resident French business class, since he led the campaign to outlaw their forced labor practices in his country in 1946. Though a French newspaper reported that French investigators had found traces of explosives in the wreckage, the French authorities ordered the destruction of copies of the report in the Central African Republic. Felix Roland Mumi, Cameroon, 1960. Mumi was lured to Geneva, where he was murdered by poison, thallium, by a man believed to be a French Secret Service agent. He was the successor and ideological soulmate of Reuben Nyobe, who was murdered in 1958. Patrice Lumumba, Joe Okito, and Maurice Mapolo, DRC, 1961. Lumumba was executed by firing squad under the command of Belgian army officers and quickly dissolved in acid. Lumumba was a fiery and unapologetic Pan-Africanist who wasted no time in joining forces with Presidents Nkrumah and Sékou Touré to fast-track Africa's real independence. From his Independence Day speech, in which he denounced Western imperialism in the presence of a global audience, to his determination to right the wrongs done to his people by the Belgians, he left no one in doubt about his intentions. Lumumba's rule lasted only 10 weeks before a Western-sponsored crisis truncated his tenure. We now know for a fact that then U.S. President Eisenhower ordered his removal for being a danger to Western interests. Sylvanus Olympio, Togo, 1963. Olympio was summarily executed by a small group of soldiers, led by Sergeant Eyadema, who went on to rule for 3 decades as a French puppet. Like Sékou Touré, Olympio wanted nothing less than true freedom and independence for his homeland, both politically and economically. Thinking he could not possibly pay the fee, he was charged 800 million francs by the French for his desire to free his people from the economic trap they had laid for him. He stunned them by raising the amount and paying it off in record time. But that was not enough for them. They wanted him and all his colleagues to remain serfs. For persisting in his quest to break free, they decided to make an example of him as a deterrence to others. Only 2 days before he was to launch his own currency, which would free him from French control, they sent a group of military thugs to murder him. Though Brother Olympio initially escaped the hired assassins, sent to take him out by climbing over a wall to seek refuge in the compound of his next-door neighbor who was the American ambassador to his country, his guests refused to save him, and instead handed him over to the ignorant thugs in pursuit of him who wasted no time in murdering him in cold blood at the gate of the American ambassador's official residence. Mehdi Ben Barka, Morocco, 1965. Kidnapped in Paris and executed. His body was never found. Ben Barka was head of the National Union of Popular Forces and secretary of the Tri-Continental Conference in Morocco. An unapologetic nationalist, he was disappeared without trace from a street in Paris. It was an open secret that he was murdered by agents of the French state. Casto Osende Afana, Cameroon, 1966. Afana was killed, then decapitated by Cameroonian forces, teleguided by the Metropole. He was a fervent African nationalist, determined to revive Ruben Niobe's ideas and dream. He was tagged a Maoist communist intent on upsetting the French-established economic order. Pierre Mulally, DRC, 1968. Mulally suffered the worst kind of treatment before being killed. He was decapitated piecemeal and had his eyes plucked out while still alive. Mulally was a Congolese nationalist and education minister in Lumumba's short-lived cabinet, who led the Simba Rebellion of 1964, whose goal was to revive Lumumba's dream of a strong, independent Congo. With help from his Western masters, Mobutu, the treacherous and kleptocratic puppet leader of the Congo, lured Mulally back home from exile in 1968 by promising him amnesty and reconciliation. However, as soon as he arrived, he was arrested, publicly tortured, and killed in the most gruesome way, after which his remains were dumped into the Congo River. Eduardo Mondlane, Mozambique, 1969. One of the intellectual giants of Africa's liberation struggle, Mondlane was assassinated by parcel bomb while leading the freedom movement in exile. Mondlane was killed in Tanzania with help from native collaborators of the Portuguese, who he was trying to uproot in his homeland. To this day, all efforts to tell the full story of his betrayal and death are stymied. Operação Mar Verde. Conakry, November 20th, 1970. The Portuguese, working in concert with the French, openly invaded Guinea-Conakry with a warship in an operation codenamed Green Sea, where Nkrumah, Cabral, and many other notable Pan-Africanists were living. 500 innocent Guineans were killed in the two-day operation. The UN passed Resolution 100 to condemn the outrage. The U.S. abstained. Osagefo Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana, 1972.